Hey guys, today we are talking Chapter 10, Biodiversity. So let's start here. We're biodiversity. Bio means life, and diversity means that it includes a variety of different things. So biodiversity is short for biological diversity. It's the variety of organisms in a given area. It's the genetic variation that occurs in that population. It's the different species that are in a community, and it's the different communities that are in an ecosystem. There are certain areas of the planet that have a lot of biodiversity, like the tropical rainforests. And humans have to understand and preserve this biodiversity because it affects us as well. Now, there is a lot of unknown biodiversity out there. We know certain species that exist, and we know that there are about 1.7 million of those species, most of which are insects. But the actual number of species on Earth isn't known. So they estimate that there could be upwards of 10 million total species out there. Here's a look at some of the numbers that we do know. We do know that there are roughly 950 different species of insects. 950,000 different species of insects, close to a million. We know certain fungi that exist. Obviously we know most of the vertebrae and but we don't know a lot of the bacteria. We don't know a lot of the fungi. There's still a lot out there that we do not know. So when they do identify a new species, they give it a scientific name. They find these species deep in the bottom of the ocean or in remote areas of the world that have yet to be explored. Sometimes you can even find them in cities. Sometimes they occur because there's been breeding between different species and a new species has been developed. And it is harder to study certain species, like insects are a little bit harder to study than larger animals. Now, there are different levels of biodiversity: species diversity, ecosystem diversity, and genetic diversity. Species diversity, obviously the difference between the different species. Dogs, cats, okay, different species. Ecosystem diversity is the difference between the different habitats or communities that they live in. So with these different levels of diversity, there's also genetic differences. A gene is part of a DNA and it's located on a chromosome and it gives a certain hereditary trait. So for example, there are different genes that give you eye color. There are different genes that give you hair color. Okay, these genes make up our body and make us who we are. Now, there are lots of benefits of biodiversity. It affects the stability of the ecosystems. It sustains populations. We depend on this biodiversity because when we have a healthy biosphere, we know that the nutrients are cycling, the water, the carbon, the nitrogen, all of those different nutrients are cycling through. And species are definitely part of these cycles that are occurring. When scientists study any species closely, they find that it does play an important role in an ecosystem. Every species plays a role in an ecosystem. It either has another species that's dependent on it or it depends on other species. So when you have one species that disappears from that ecosystem, it can affect the whole food web. So for example, you have what's called a keystone species. This is a species that is critical to the functioning of the ecosystem that it lives in because it affects the survival of a lot of the other species that exist in that community. So an example would be the sea otter. If the sea otters were to suddenly disappear, that would be a problem because the sea otters keep the sea urchin population in check. And then the kelp that is there would be lost because all of the sea urchins would be eating all the kelp and then there wouldn't be any more kelp. Also, seals are food for some of the larger mammals. So when you look at genetic diversity within the different species and the different populations, these genetic variations increase the chance that these populations can survive. One of the things we've talked about already with evolution is that, and natural selection is that when a species is fits in its environment, it's able to survive and reproduce and pass that DNA on. And so when there is a change in that DNA, if it's favorable to the environment, then they're going to be able to pass that DNA on and keep that favorable trait. If it's not favorable, they'll die out and that DNA will not get passed along. So you have what's called a bottleneck effect. So you have a population size, something happens that causes that population to shrink. And so it's like that population passes through that bottleneck. And so even when that population is able to increase again, you can see that some of the species or some of the parts of the population didn't survive and make it through. So some of those genes were removed from that genetic pool. The members of the population then might become more likely to inherit genetic diseases that could kill them. Now, there are lots of species that have medical and industrial uses for humans. A lot of the drugs that we take in the United States are derived from plants. Almost all of the antibiotics are derived from chemicals that we find in fungi. So these are very important for us because they help keep us healthy and get rid of sicknesses. And they're always finding new uses for different things. Here's just a list of some of the things that we use for treating certain things, like Taxol, which is Pacific Yew. It's found in North America, and it's found to be an anti-cancer agent, which means that it's against cancer. So that's good. Cortisone, you may have heard of that before. It comes from wild yam in Central America, and that is used in a lot of drugs to help with pain. Also, we have some agricultural uses of a lot of these things. A lot of the crops that are out there are hybrids. That means that we combine genetic material from two different vegetables or two different fruits, and we made a new one. Because if you depend on too few plants for your food, then that risks the chance that that food will disappear. Famines have been known to occur because an important crop was taken out by a disease or by drought. And so the corn was saved because they started crossbreeding them with other types of corn. And so now they're able to survive more harsh conditions. So here are some agricultural uses or places where we can find some of these things. Like in North America, Central America, and South America, we find corn, potatoes, pumpkin, pineapples, okay? All those wonderful things that we like to eat. In India, East Asia, and the Pacific Islands, you find things like soybeans, rice, bananas, oranges, eggplant, chicken, okay? Obviously, we find those things in the United States too, but those are things that are used for agricultural purposes where they came from. Okay, so some people think that we should preserve the biodiversity because it's for ethical reasons. Like who are we to eliminate animals or plants? You know, what gives us the right to mess with nature like that? They think that these species and these ecosystems have a right to exist. People also value biodiversity because it looks nice. I mean, if you travel to the Caribbean, you want to go there because it's beautiful and it has a lot of diversity. So that tourism needs to sustain the biodiversity of those areas that will continue to attract people to come and visit those places. So now we're looking at biodiversity at risk. So there are species that have gone extinct, and when it occurs in a short period of time, it's called a mass extinction. We've had a lot of those mass extinctions that have occurred. I'm sure you can remember the dinosaurs. That was a mass extinction. And it takes millions of years for that biodiversity to come back after there's a mass extinction. So you can see here some major extinctions over time. So that's indicated by the green. So you can see it took a while for that biodiversity to come back, like 100 million years. Scientists say that we're in the midst of another mass extinction. There are a lot of species that are going on the endangered list um, because they're disappearing very rapidly. Something like 25% of all species on Earth will become extinct before the year 2100. So that's a lot. Um, there are large populations that adapt easily to habitats. They're not likely to become extinct. If they can adapt to a different environment, they can continue to survive. But the small there's not a lot of them, and they live only in certain areas. They're easily susceptible to becoming extinct. The ones that are especially at risk are those that migrate because they need those large or special habitats. And a lot of times those habitats are being exploited by humans. They're being turned into housing developments or shopping malls. And so when that occurs, those species have nowhere to go. An endangered species is one that has been identified to be in danger of extinction. It's being protected because it's endangered. A threatened species is one that's likely to become endangered in the future. So endangered means there's not very many of them and we have to protect them. Threatened means we better be careful because if we're not, they're going to be endangered as well. So how do humans cause extinctions? Well, we destroy their homes. We destroy where they live. We have introduced non-native species, which affects the whole population. We've polluted. We've over-harvested these species like fish. And so we're killing them at alarming rates. So here are species that are known to be threatened worldwide. Mammals, there's 1,130 that are threatened. 87 have become extinct. And so that's a 26% of the species that may be threatened. Plants, 30,827 have been threatened. And that's not a lot because, there's a lot of plants out there. So here's something that occurs. Human population is growing, which we just learned about in the last chapter. And because of that, we need more space to grow our own food. We need space for roads so we can travel, and we need places for people to live. And so we're destroying habitats of these animals, and then they have nowhere to go. It's estimated that about 75% of these extinctions are occurring because they are losing their place to live. And you can see there's a bear there. There's a street, so they're being killed by cars as well. A lot of the Florida panthers, one of the biggest things that's taking them out is cars because they're trying to move through highways and they're being hit by cars because a lot of their habitat was destroyed. In 2001, there were fewer than 80 Florida panthers left. And so they have attempted to rebuild that population. Invasive species are ones that are not native to that region, and someone brings it into that region and then it can threaten the native species that live there because they don't have any natural defenses against that animal. They've never encountered it before. They don't know how to survive against it. And so that's why, if you buy snakes, you're not allowed to take them and just put them out into the wild. Hawaii actually doesn't even allow you to bring snakes into the country because they don't want them there. Excessive hunting can also lead to extinction. This happened in the 1800s and early 1900s when the carrier pigeons were hunted to extinction, or pasture pigeons. There are thousands of rare species worldwide that are harvested as pets. And then some animals get poached, like elephants get poached for their tusks. So we're going to pick up here in the next Ed puzzle.